Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory.
So, you have a movie for me? Yes, sir, I do.
How is FilmTube not a thing yet? Hello world! Today we're diving into a genre very near and dear to my heart, TV and film reviews on YouTube. We're talking about critics, fans, audiences, even haters, none of which started on the internet. The history of film criticism dates back to the early 1900s, when cinema was just starting out. Many people didn't see film as art at the time, and so the earliest critics were dedicated to demonstrating how cinema, like the arts that came before it, was important and worthy of serious attention. By the 1940s, this was pretty well established, and so film reviews were able to morph into a more interesting style, meant to persuade the reader of the critics' arguments. Critics also developed rating systems and kept up with the latest releases as a way to help people gauge what to watch. By the 1960s, TV reviews were also on the rise. It started with reviews of technology before TV listings became more popular in newspapers, along with little bits of criticism. Eventually, digests were introduced.
Check it out.
Oh, Soap Opera Digest!
Where top 10s, recaps, and theories became more popular. Meanwhile, a whole world of unsanctioned fan production was occurring, with zines, meaning homemade magazines, and VHS tapes circulating regularly among fan communities. Eventually, the internet was able to provide everyone with the opportunity to review a film or TV show, and this is why platforms like Facebook and Twitter are so important in understanding a film's reception. Interestingly, very few people consider YouTube's role in reception and criticism, and that's where we come in. By my account of researching 50 channels, there are 4 categories of film and TV analysis, breakdown, and review videos, which for the sake of simplicity, I'll refer to as FilmTube from time to time in this video. Before we get started, a quick disclaimer as always, my analysis isn't scientifically perfect, and so it's not meant to cover every single video ever released. These are just the major categories that are meant to highlight the most major trends. Breakdown channels follow ongoing TV series and film franchises, fulfilling multiple ongoing functions for the fan community. Their videos exist on a spectrum. At one end, there's the recap video.
Welcome to the Man of Recaps. This is Westworld, Season 1.
Which just goes through an episode or a film's chronology and summarizes what happens. Then we have breakdown videos, which are similar but add tidbits of analysis or theory in order to contextualize what's going on.
So the episode titled Passe Domine actually comes from the Bible. In Joel 2:17, we can find the phrase which translates to, "Spare Lord, spare your people, be not angry with us forever." This kind of has a sway over the entire episode, with there being a motif of gods and forgiveness.
Next comes theory videos, which break from chronology and focuses instead on the various guesses fans have to a deeper meaning or what might happen in the future.
Today, we're discussing Westworld and the concept of the mirror world.
Finally, there are Easter egg videos, which are bound by neither chronology nor theories and focuses instead on little details or tidbits that add meaning to the viewing experience. Some channels also engage with other types of content, like top 10 lists, reactions to franchise announcements, or reviews. Breakdown channels exist in multiple languages.
Les références religieuses et notamment bibliques sont nombreuses dans cet épisode.
Que desencadena en una saturación del sistema y, lógicamente, en una crisis económica.
2年，西部世界第3季就要来了。
Which demonstrates not only the global reach of the franchises they cover, but also the global reach of YouTube's own genres. Channels in different languages are not as popular in the other categories, which suggests that there's something specific about the breakdown format that does well in translation. Unlike breakdown channels, which tend to follow the biggest franchises, review channels are more diverse in what they analyze. Instead of focusing on the title, review channels emphasize the personal preference of individual creators, often using their name as the channel's brand. They represent the most traditional approach to film criticism and reviews, just kind of upgraded for the 21st century in the form of a talking head vlog. Analysis channels are more about what makes a film important rather than good or bad. There are usually two types of analysis for these kinds of videos. Creative analysis, which highlights the use of specific techniques and what makes for good filmmaking, and academic analysis, which highlights the cultural, philosophical, and social value of film by reading into its deeper meanings and implications.
Nevertheless, in trying to make the events and characters of the Harry Potter series relevant to our present political moment, I think some of the actual political commentary which exists in these books and films gets lost a little.
Both are common pastimes for college film societies, where film production and film studies students come together to argue about why film matters. Special programming channels have a signature style that makes their content really well known. These channels are more dedicated to their own branding rather than the titles that they are reviewing. Their content is so innovative that regardless of which titles they actually choose, their analysis ends up following a formula that gets them views. These are probably the most ubiquitous and the funniest type of content.
Battles that would have been way cooler with lightsabers, or if they just moved around a little more.
In terms of that signature style, some channels focus on a specific type of content, like teen dramas, while others use a certain format, like top 10s. Out of all the categories, these channels are most likely run by media professionals under a larger digital media company, but more on this point later. In terms of evolutionary timeline, there is significant overlap between the different categories of channels because all of them are still going strong today. Nevertheless, up and down goes the tide of popularity, and so here are some estimates. Out of the 50 channels I looked at, reviews and special programming channels were the earliest creators, with many starting their channel and producing their most popular videos to date before 2015. Analysis channels came next, with many of their most popular videos being uploaded from 2015 to 2018. Breakdown channels seem to be the current trend, with many starting their channel after 2018 and still growing today. Most of these channels saw a spike in April or May of 2019, which marked the release of Avengers Endgame. This demonstrates how many of these channels follow the same large franchises and rely on the popularity of these fandoms in order to grow. Of course, not everyone looking for a film or TV show on YouTube is necessarily looking for the categories I just mentioned, and so here are some related genres or subgenres. Firstly, we have official marketing and press materials released by the filmmakers themselves. This includes trailers, interviews, behind the scenes, bloopers, special announcements, and convention panels. These officially sanctioned videos remind us that YouTube is a weird mishmash of different voices, where industry professionals can exist alongside amateur reviews. Speaking of amateur, does anyone remember spoofs? Back in the early days of YouTube, it was spoofs of popular movies that catapulted a lot of YouTubers into fame. Put these spoofs along with the official trailer of Twilight, and you get a sense of what YouTube was like about a decade ago. Fan remixes have also been around for a really long time.
I've never given much thought to how I would die.
These videos usually cut together clips with music in order to create a more emotional viewing experience. Last but not least, there is a strong anime review community on YouTube who would otherwise fall under the reviews special programming categories, except that manga and anime usually constitute a world of their own. Glass Reflection and Geekuk are my fave, but if you have any other ones, please leave them in the comment section below. One of the first things that pops up when you type film criticism on YouTube controversy is a Reddit page about how YouTube film critics suck. These Redditors consider YouTube film critics as shallow, simple, cringingly not funny, and most importantly, without the right credentials. Compared to the bigwigs of yesteryear like Roger Ebert or Mark Kermode, YouTube film critics are just not as sophisticated. I mean, I don't know my way around film criticism, and so they might have a point, but there is a deeper theoretical implication to their argument, and that is Social hierarchy. Film criticism lives on hierarchies because it's a system of taste making, or the idea that some people's tastes are better than others and therefore should be listened to more. This unclear but tangible standard is then passed down to every Redditor, every YouTuber, in order to maintain a system that has so far kept journalistic criticism at the very top. And interestingly, in the age of social media, these hierarchies have become split between the different platforms. While YouTube has found itself towards the bottom of the ladder, Film Twitter is a respected institution. Another issue of social hierarchies is that the glorification of certain individuals necessarily means the silencing of others. Critics don't just voice their opinions and be done with it. They have an impact on viewers and potentially even the future of the film industry. In the US, film criticism is heavily dominated by white cisgendered men. And while we can give these men the benefit of the doubt and assume that they can be totally objective, time and again we've seen how difficult it is for anyone to overcome the biases that are ingrained in their identities. One study at San Diego State University found that male critics were less likely than female critics to mention female directors. Considering how male critics outnumber female critics 3-1, that's a big disadvantage for female-led films. The divide between white critics and critics of color is even more stark, nearly 8-1. And this potentially helps explain why there is a diversity problem that persists in the rest of the industry. It's an ugly cycle in which the same types of shows and films get critically praised, leading to more of its kind being made and nothing else getting recognized. We're starting to see a change in the industry, but criticism must also be a part of that change in order for the system to change as a whole. And despite being praised for its diversity and openness, YouTube as a platform reflects the same dynamics when it comes to FilmTube. Out of the 50 channels I researched, about a handful were created by women and only one represented a Black creator. Only by being Chinese myself was I able to find a couple more channels in the Sinosphere. And this is the bias I'm talking about. It doesn't necessarily always have to be bad. Because of my identity, I'm able to see things that other people can't, and same with their identities. This might be a great thing, but it needs to be balanced, and that's the problem right now. And that's what social media is good for, a diversity of voices happening all at the same time. And while YouTube still faces the same problems as traditional film criticism, it's likely where change is going to happen as well. Another major controversy in FilmTube is the use of copyright materials and fair use.
In the US, content that might be considered fair use includes commentary, criticism, or news reporting.
FilmTube as a whole generally qualifies under fair use because the videos add a judgment call, a theory, a summary, or an overview. In other words, they are changing the nature of the viewing experience so that you're not watching Game of Thrones. You're watching a person's take on Game of Thrones, which could be better or worse, but definitely different from watching the show itself. One argument that I find hilarious is that a copy of a film or TV show is necessarily going to take away viewers from the original thing, and that if it wasn't for the copy, viewers would be going to the real thing instead. That's kind of an overconfident assumption, since there was never a guarantee that the viewers of the copy would be watching the real thing in the first place. Even if I'm on a pirate site, for example, looking for Game of Thrones, there's no guarantee that if I don't find it, that I would get a membership to HBO Max and watch the legal thing. I might just not watch it. And that's for pirated versions, which are just illegal, period. If I'm watching a breakdown or a review, there could be a number of reasons why I would prefer to watch this thing over Game of Thrones itself. If anything, their coverage of the title will likely bring the title more awareness, even if it's negative. And so this might be a reason for studios to back down. Unfortunately, they don't. And while fair use is a nice dream, it's often more complicated than it seems. For one thing, fair use is sensitive to whether or not the copy of the original material is making money. For YouTube, this means whether they're allowed to put an ad on the video and give creators AdSense money. To ensure minimal kerfuffle between the different parties, YouTube has introduced a system called Content ID. If your video is flagged, you and the company that flagged it go through a series of back and forths to ensure that both of you want to take this to court. Usually in this process, one side backs down, often the side that can't afford a lawyer, and months, even years in the legal process. Fair use is there, but it requires a lot of time, energy, and money to actually get to, even if you're right. This means that the system tends to side with the studios rather than the creators. Think of it as a hero's quest. In order to accomplish his missions, the hero needs a sword, which is stashed behind a dragon, which he needs to defeat with a sword. You see the problem? I mean, I don't have a solution. I know that YouTube isn't looking for trouble and the advertisers aren't looking for trouble. And because there are billions upon billions of hours being uploaded to YouTube a day, it's impossible to figure out whether each video qualifies for fair use. Or we just need to try harder. Despite these copyright worries, many creators still manage to find revenue beyond YouTube's on and off AdSense money. Brand deals exist, but surprisingly to a lesser degree than in other genres like fitness. Instead, FilmTube relies heavily on Patreon, since their content is often not algorithmically friendly, meaning that there are a number of characteristics that make FilmTube content less likely to get recommended by YouTube's algorithm. First is the use of copyright materials, but there is also the fact that analysis or theory videos take forever to produce due to their detailed approach and the need for background research. There's a commonly held belief that the algorithm favors channels who produce more frequently, which can be very hard for the channels we're talking about. Finally, while I did say that breakdown channels use large franchises in order to get themselves more views, creators still want to talk about the things that they actually enjoy, regardless of whether or not they're popular. Therefore, direct support from viewers are very important for FilmTube. Beyond Patreon, several creators also own and operate other types of content or services that can be monetized through subscriptions and advertising. Patrick H. Willem, for example, created his own streaming platform called Nebula, which operates similarly to Patreon by offering exclusive content via subscriptions. Multiple channels also have podcasts, on which creators can run ads or put behind a paywall. And of course, there's always merch. And who doesn't want a mug with both their favorite show and their favorite YouTuber on it? There's one more revenue model that I had to dig for in this genre. While doing my research, I was getting worried about the lack of advertising and brand sponsorships in these videos, which raised questions like, are these channels not making any money? Are these channels secretly being funded by the studio? Eventually, I realized that some channels, especially the ones under special programming, are owned by digital media companies. Screen Rant, for example, is owned by Canadian company Velnet, while Cinefix is run by Mashable. According to webpublisherpro.com, digital media companies make money through a combination of business models, including digital advertising, subscriptions, affiliate linking, and e-commerce sales. They're not exactly multi-channel networks, which are the most well-known type of companies that operate within the YouTube ecosystem. But these digital media companies do run multiple channels. They seem to focus on different modes of online publishing, from online magazines to podcasts. The YouTube channel is just one part of a larger strategy that pushes content across multiple platforms in different modalities. What's the real difference between these companies and multi-channel networks? I'm honestly not that sure. If you have any idea, please leave them in the comment section below. This is a learning experience for me too, so let's help inform each other. To summarize, whether it's digital publishers or dedicated fans, creators who make content about film and TV on YouTube make up a thriving community. While they face both external pressures and internal biases, their dedication to their craft can't be questioned. And they have a lot to teach us in regards to how people engage with the world's biggest franchises as both audience members and media creators in their own right. Thanks so much for watching this episode. The sun literally went down as I was talking because it just took so long because I love this content so much. I actually watch a lot of the channels that I mentioned in this video, and so hats off to them. I also study cinema and media studies, and I'm a huge fan of a lot of different things, and so this episode definitely has a very special place in my heart. If you have any other genres you'd like me to cover, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!